Hi everyone. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for tuning in. I think it is well known now on this channel that I am a Canadian. I have lived here my whole life thus far, and will probably be staying here for a while. Now, I'm going to start this video off by stating that the show I am speaking about today is a piece of Canadian indigenous puppet media, and although I personally am not indigenous, their culture has played a large part in my life. I acknowledge that the land I live on is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Today I am going to be discussing very briefly about the history of the indigenous people of Canada, mainly the Ojibwe people. I want to inform people as respectfully as I can about what has happened in the past, and I think it is important to know this before talking about the puppet show. If I get any information incorrect, please let me know. Anyways, I was absolutely blessed to be brought up within the culture of the Ojibwe people. Keep in mind that there are many different First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities across Canada, but I will mainly be discussing the Ojibwe people today, as it applies not only to my personal experiences, but to the show we are talking about. At the time of my childhood, watching Indigenous shows on APTN, the Aboriginal People's Television Network, was just a common thing I did every day. Shows such as the Longhouse Tales, which don't worry everyone, I'm going to talk about it, Raven Tales, and Wapos Bay, were personal favorites of mine. I attended powwows and smudging ceremonies, as well as often having school field trips to learn traditional stories, foods, dances, and the history of the native people of Canada. I grew up very close to a First Nations reserve, and went to high school beside another one. A reserve is an area set aside by the federal government for the uses of Indigenous people. As you may know, when settlers came to Canada, they attempted to implement their way of life onto the people already on this land. They seized the land, and after great conflict with the Indigenous people, they gave them reserves to live on. These reserves are often on not great land, and are far away from where new settlers were expected to come. I am not going to delve into the controversy of reserves, but you must understand how fortunate I was to be surrounded by people who showed me a way of life I would have never experienced if I had grew up somewhere else. But I never realized that I was lucky at the time. I had assumed every other non-Indigenous person in Canada had grew up in a similar fashion to me. But as I grew older and moved to a new place, I was surprised by the lack of knowledge of non-First Nations people about the tragic history of the original inhabitants of Canada. I was always well aware of the residential schools of Canada when I was growing up. I was surprised that many people did not learn about this in school, nor had met anyone who was in a residential school. The first residential school was started in the early 1800s, where Indigenous children were taken away from their families and forced to adhere to Euro-Canadian and Christian ways of life. The conditions of these schools were very poor, and children often would die from disease and starvation, as well as being horribly subjected to physical and sexual assault. And it's not like this was from so long ago. The last residential school closed in 1996. I've talked to many people who are at these schools, parents and grandparents of my friends, and I cannot fathom how anyone would want to take away who you are. And if you died, they would just put you in a hole in the ground. I know things like this have happened so often in the past, and continue to this day, and it is the worst of people. Will we ever learn from history? It doesn't really seem like it, does it? Anyways, to stop being such a Debbie Downer, I think where I'm trying to go with this is we need more Indigenous representation in mainstream children's television and film. Indigenous children need to see themselves represented in the media, and non-Indigenous kids should learn about other cultures, especially from within their own countries. I am still shocked at the lack of information being taught to the new generation about Canada's history, and I want to see more than ever before. This leads me to a show I watched as a kid. A show some people refused to watch because the puppets were too uncanny valley for them. But if they had just given it a chance, it is an incredible show that revolves around an Ojibwe family and their adventures. The show is called Tipi Tales.
From the silence came a voice. Listen and you'll hear ancient words of wisdom the first people brought to share. The world is always turning, it carries us along. Let the 7 sacred laws make your spirit strong. gather round the teepee, hear the stories that we tell. We listen to the elders, we learn our lessons well. Lisbeth and Junior, Russell and Sam, learning, growing. Gather round the teepee, gather round the teepee. Tipi Tales.
With a theme song written and sung by Fred Penner, you know you're in for something good. Tipi Tales was created by Lisa Meaches and Dave Courchaine, two important Indigenous Canadians from Manitoba who have worked to keep their culture alive. Lisa, an extremely experienced producer, founded the company Eagle Vision and successfully produced shows such as Ice Road Truckers, The Sharing Circle, and of course, Tipi Tales. Dave was an elder who helped guide the show towards being authentic in the portrayal of Ojibwe people and their stories, as well as coming up with the name Eagle Vision for their production company. He founded the Turtle Lodge International Center for Indigenous Education and Wellness, and spread the traditional ways of the Anishinaabe Nation. Sadly, he passed away in 2021, but made an incredible impact in Canadian Indigenous history.
One of the biggest challenges we face today in our current reality is to live out the fullness of our identity as a very unique people.
Tipi Tales is about the adventures and mishaps that a group of cousins encounter when they visit their great-grandparents' house. Great-grandfather and great-grandmother often start the episode at their cabin by discussing an item, event, or situation that will come up later in the episode.
Give me a pie after lunch or dinner. Your pie's the best. Your pie's a winner. My oh my. Great-grandma Saskatoon berry pie.
A child will usually arrive at the cabin and begin with what will lead to the conflict of the episode, such as getting ready to dance at a powwow. We are often given a brief song before we travel to what the four children are up to outside of the cabin around the teepee. For those who don't know, a teepee is a cone-shaped tented structure with an opening at the top for smoke from a small fire inside to escape. It is made of animal hide or canvas, and many different Indigenous tribes across Canada and the US would use these as their dwelling. Today, they are more commonly used for ceremonial purposes than living inside of them, but are still common to see. There are 4 young children: Russell, a 4-year-old who is big for his age and loves food; Sam, a 3-year-old who likes stirring the pot and causing everyone a little bit of grief; Elizabeth, a 5-year-old who thinks she's better than the others just because she's a little bit older; and Junior, also a 5-year-old who is really just a mini-me version of great-grandfather. They play just as young children are expected to, with conflicts arising when they can't find common ground in a game, lie about something, or one of them makes them feel bad about themselves. When the children become sad or angry, they go to a great-grandparent who tells them that they should visit a certain animal. There are 7 different animals, all representing one of the 7 sacred teachings. The wolf represents humility, Sabe, or Bigfoot, is honesty, the bear represents courage, the eagle represents love, buffalo represents respect, turtle represents truth, and the beaver represents wisdom. Before I go any further, I do have to say that Bigfoot is in this show, which I find very fun. He is known as Sabe and just appears in the form of feet. That's all I'm going to say about this, but I find it hilarious that the kids are just cool with Bigfoot being around. The animal they encounter that episode will be directly related to what is going on. For example, Junior becomes very stuck up and wants his cousins to write a song about how good he is at things. Then he gets frustrated about how the others don't enjoy doing that and goes to great-grandfather. Great-grandfather tells him to go to the wolf, who represents humility, and teaches him that essentially there was way too much of him in comparison to the others, as he cared about 3 people: me, myself, and I. The episodes are developed completely around the 7 sacred teachings and broken down into a simplistic way for preschoolers to understand. The conflicts are very identifiable, like one child telling the other that they are dancing wrong, a child stealing chocolate, or a child not getting a turn to tell a story. The interactions between the adult characters and the child characters are also genuine, which leads me into discussing the writing in the series.
The word game. Just what exactly is a game?
When you're writing for children, a lot of people think that, oh, it's easy. It's not. There's nowhere to hide. They understand everything. They have all the emotions that we have as an adult. They go through them much faster. You know, the cycle of joy to tragedy is every 5 minutes.
And out of sight. Better do these dishes. Maybe one more piece of pie first.
Now, the writing credits are scattered between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. However, though not all the writers were Indigenous, the ones that were in the creative team helped guide others to tell authentic stories of the Ojibwe people. The voice cast features Indigenous performers from the Ojibwe, Cree, and Métis groups. The voice cast is led by Doul Desjarlais, who plays great-grandfather. Great-grandmother is played by Michelle St. John. Ryan Rajendra Black plays Junior. Herbie Barnes plays Russell. Rebecca Gibson plays Elizabeth. And Jan Skeen plays Sam. Herbie, Rebecca, and Jan are also puppeteers on the show as well, with Jan being the lead puppeteer. The animal characters are portrayed by the following people. Curtis Shingoose Johnny plays Wolf. Tina Keeper plays Buffalo. Marcia Knight plays Turtle. Ted Longbottom plays Beaver. Tracy McCorrister plays Eagle. Jerry Bennett plays Sabe. And Ray St. Germain plays Bear. The puppets were designed and created by Doug Moreau, a special effects artist who specializes in makeup and prosthetics. The animatronic bits were created by George Grove, animal sculptures by Mike Fields, and mechanical fabrication by Brad Proctor. Craig Skeen was the construction coordinator for the puppets. Doug, George, and Brad also worked as puppeteers on the show, as it really appears that these puppets are quite complicated, with multiple mechanisms going on at once. The puppets are rod animatronics with different mechanisms to control the eyes, mouth, and limbs. The puppets took 2 puppeteers to control, and it is one of the most creative ideas for puppets I have ever seen on a children's show. Watching the documentary about the creation of the show on the Sharing Circle made me see how difficult it is to work with these puppets on a giant miniature set that was built. There are also traditional glove puppets for some of the animals, including the beaver and the eagle. However, sadly, the only major discussions I have ever seen of this show from people I know was how scary the puppets are. I can't necessarily disagree with that. Most puppets that attempt to look human often go into the category of uncanny. However, they are completely unique, like nothing else on television at that time. The goal of the puppets were that they weren't too childish nor cartoony, and the animals were to represent the most authentic versions of that animal and not look fake, or for lack of a better word, comical. To explain the vibe of the show, it is the most relaxing and sweet show I have ever watched. Even though the puppets were slightly scary to little me, the second the story began, I was always enthralled. It is an excellent way to begin teaching children about Indigenous culture, specifically Ojibwe, and is heartwarming and calming in its delivery. The show was filmed in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and was co-produced by Treehouse TV and APTN, and aired on both channels. Treehouse TV is the biggest preschool television channel in Canada, and Tipi Tales became the first mainstream Indigenous children's show. The show filmed 78 10 to 14 minute episodes over the span of 3 seasons, starting in 2003, and aired on Treehouse until 2009, and APTN until 2010. The show won 2 Parents' Choice Awards, but soon faded away. No notable Indigenous shows have aired on Treehouse TV since, and please correct me if I'm wrong, of course. However, other shows such as Anana's Tent, Spirit Rangers, Taiga Talks, and Raven Tales, which air on APTN, teach children about the cultures of the original inhabitants of North America. Some of the episodes of Tipi Tales are available on YouTube, and the rest appear to be on eBay for purchase. Put on even one episode and see what it's like. I guarantee you might learn something new. Overall, shows like Tipi Tales bring forth a way of life that was previously marked by uncertainty. After hundreds of years of struggle, the knowledge that the Indigenous people of Canada are still here and thriving is a testament to their strength, endurance, and love towards their culture. For Indigenous children to see characters on television that are similar to them is so important, and this show is there to represent something so neglected in mainstream children's television. If only all the world could listen to the 7 teachings: humility, honesty, courage, love, respect, truth, and wisdom, we will finally know peace. And I just really need to talk about this, in hopes that this show will never become a piece of obscure puppet media. And don't worry, I'm going to get to the Longhouse Tales eventually. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you're feeling it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Eagle represents